Some stories are buried because they are embarrassing. Some are buried because they are dangerous. And some are buried because no one can explain them. In 1978, during a routine renovation of an old courthouse in Savannah, Georgia, workers uncovered a locked wooden cabinet hidden beneath a collapsed floorboard. Inside was a collection of plantation records sealed in waxed leather, warped by decades of humidity but somehow still intact. At first, the documents looked ordinary. Cotton tallies, property transfers, names and numbers written in careful ink. The kind of paperwork that built the American South. But then the clerk reviewing them noticed something strange. Several entries were written in red ink. Red ink was never used for routine records. These entries were dated between 1831 and 1834. And every one of them described the same impossible phenomenon. Enslaved children who spoke 2 languages fluently. Not just English. Another language officials described as an unknown African tongue. These children had been born in Georgia. They had never left America. They had never been taught this language. Even more disturbing, medical examiners reported that the children could read and write in both languages. Some demonstrated knowledge of places, rituals, and historical events they could not possibly have learned. 14 children were named in the records. 7 were examined. 7 vanished before they could be. The files were sealed, locked away, never officially explained, and for nearly 200 years, no one spoke of them again. Until now. If you're drawn to stories where history turns dark and uncomfortable, make sure you subscribe, share this video, and leave a comment. Because this is only the beginning. And what happened in coastal Georgia will only grow stranger the deeper we go. This story truly begins in the spring of 1831. Sarah Pierce arrived in Savannah that March with her husband Edmund, a physician from Massachusetts. Edmund had accepted a position as county health inspector, a job that promised stability after years of struggling to maintain a medical practice in Boston. Savannah looked beautiful when they arrived. Oak trees draped in Spanish moss. Elegant homes lining manicured squares. A bustling port filled with ships from Europe and the Caribbean. But Sarah quickly realized that beneath the charm was something deeply wrong. She kept journals, leather-bound books she filled daily with observations, thoughts, and unease. Those journals still exist today, preserved in historical archives. And they tell a story no one at the time wanted recorded. She wrote about the markets where enslaved people were sold in public. Mothers separated from children, husbands from wives, children standing barefoot on auction blocks while buyers examined their teeth, their arms, their backs. "It troubles my sleep," she wrote. "Edmund tells me I must accustom myself to the customs here, but some customs should not be endured." The Pierces lived on East Broad Street in a narrow but comfortable home near the city center. With the house came 2 enslaved women provided by the landlord. Martha, the cook, and Bess, who handled laundry and heavy work. Sarah struggled with this arrangement. She knew she benefited from a system she believed was immoral, yet refusing it would have marked her as dangerous or ungrateful in Savannah society. One morning, Sarah wrote that Martha sang while working. It was not English. It was not a hymn. When Sarah asked about it, Martha fell silent. Eventually, she said it was something her grandmother used to sing. Words passed down, meanings forgotten. We keep the sounds, she said. Even when we do not know what they mean anymore. That sentence stayed with Sarah. Edmund's job took him deep into the plantation system. He examined enslaved people for disease, certified them fit for labor, and treated injuries caused by overwork and punishment. He saw children with bones warped from malnutrition, men with untreated fractures, women suffering infections that went ignored because treatment cost money. One night he told Sarah about a 7-year-old boy whose arm had been crushed by machinery. The plantation owner refused to authorize an amputation because the child had not yet proven his value. Edmund performed the surgery anyway. The boy died days later. Sarah noted that Edmund began drinking more, sleeping less, flinching at sudden sounds. Savannah in 1831 was built on contradictions. Wealth and beauty funded by cruelty. Churches filled on Sunday, auction blocks filled the rest of the week. The coastal plantations were especially brutal. Rice and cotton fields stretched across swamps and barrier islands. Disease was constant, death was expected, but these regions also allowed something unusual. Because plantation owners often stayed away, enslaved communities preserved fragments of African culture. Songs, stories, beliefs, languages that had survived generations of forced silence. But what Sarah would soon encounter went far beyond preserved tradition. In late summer of 1831, Edmund was asked to assist with a medical examination unlike any he had ever performed. The patient was a child, 6 years old, born on a plantation outside Savannah. The plantation owner claimed the child spoke languages no one could identify. That he said things he should not know. At first, Edmund assumed exaggeration or superstition. He was wrong. That examination would lead to others. 7 in total, and each one would leave behind reports so disturbing that officials chose to bury them rather than explain them. Children who refused to speak English in certain places. Children who panicked when separated from one another. Children who described events that had occurred decades before they were born. And 7 more children who were never examined at all. They disappeared. By the time Georgia officials realized something was deeply wrong, it was already too late. If you're enjoying this story so far, hit the subscribe button, share this video, and let me know in the comments what you think was happening. Was it cultural memory, something psychological, or something far darker? In part 2, we'll dive into the first examination, and what Edmund Pierce wrote in his private notes that terrified him enough to consider leaving Savannah forever. Because once the children began speaking, history itself seemed to speak through them. Part 2. The day the children spoke. There is a moment when fear enters a room quietly. Not with screaming, not with violence, but with the sudden realization that something is wrong in a way you cannot explain. This is the story of that moment. And once you hear what happened inside that small sick house on a Georgia plantation, you will understand why these records were locked away for nearly 2 centuries. If you enjoy historical mysteries that turn unsettling fast, make sure you subscribe, share this video, and leave a comment. Because this story does not get safer as it goes on. It gets worse. By the summer of 1831, Savannah was already drowning in heat. The air hung thick and wet, pressing down on the city like a heavy blanket. Sarah Pierce wrote that even the nights offered little relief, only dampness and restless sleep. She noticed something else during those early months. Children of all races played together freely until about the age of 7. Black and white children laughed together in yards and streets, chasing each other without fear or awareness of the world waiting for them. Then something changed. Around that age, the rules appeared. The separation hardened. Play turned into distance. Distance turned into obedience. It was into this fragile boundary between innocence and order that the first incident occurred. June 12, 1831. A Thursday. Edmund Pierce was barely awake when pounding struck the front door. A rider from Bellbrook Plantation stood outside, his horse slick with sweat and foam from hard travel. The overseer, Walter Grimm, had sent him. 3 children were ill, or at least, that was how Grimm described it. High fever, confusion, speaking in tongues. Edmund prepared his medical bag immediately. Sarah insisted on coming. She had asked for weeks to accompany him to a plantation. Edmund resisted at first, citing propriety and danger. But Sarah would not relent. If you can witness it, so can I, she told him. And if we both see it, maybe the truth will not be lost. They traveled by carriage for nearly 3 hours. The city slowly dissolved behind them, replaced by muddy roads and towering oak trees. Spanish moss draped the branches like veils, turning the road into a tunnel of shadow and green light. Sarah found it beautiful, and deeply unsettling. Bellbrook Plantation rose into view as they crested a small hill. It was far larger than Sarah expected. A white brick main house stood above endless fields of cotton and corn. People worked everywhere under the punishing sun. She counted over 50 laborers from the road alone. Edmund later told her there were nearly 200 enslaved people on Bellbrook. The slave quarters sat behind the main house. 2 long rows of small wooden cabins with gardens squeezed between them. Children played barefoot in the dirt, laughing and running as if nothing in the world could touch them. That contrast struck Sarah hard. Walter Grimm met them outside the main house. He was a large man with burned skin and rough hands. His voice carried agitation he tried and failed to hide. "The children are in the sick house," he said. "Been there since yesterday. Won't eat. Won't respond. Just talking. Talking how? Edmund asked. Some language nobody knows, Grimm said. African maybe, but none of the others understand it. Not even their mothers. The sick house stood apart from the quarters. A single room, no windows, only narrow gaps in the walls to let air pass through. As soon as Sarah stepped inside, her breath caught. 3 children sat on wooden benches. 2 girls and 1 boy. Ages 5 to 8, their backs straight, hands folded in their laps. They were not crying. They were not restless. They were speaking. All 3 spoke at the same time. The sound made Sarah's skin prickle. It was not babbling, not nonsense. It had rhythm, structure, repetition, almost musical. The most disturbing part was how perfectly synchronized they were. Their voices blended into one. It was impossible to tell where one ended and another began. Edmund introduced himself calmly. No response. He examined the nearest girl. Pulse steady. Breathing normal. Eyes responsive. No fever. Healthy. Sarah wrote quickly in her notebook. No physical illness. No elevated temperature. No visible distress. Yet their awareness seemed absent. As if their minds were somewhere else entirely. Edmund tried questions. Names. Family. Simple requests. Nothing. He tried water. Food. Changes in tone. Nothing. Then he stepped directly in front of the oldest girl, blocking her view of the wall. Can you hear me? He asked firmly. If you understand English, respond. For the first time, the chanting broke. The boy and the younger girl continued speaking. The oldest girl fell silent. 3 seconds passed. Then she spoke. Her voice was calm, clear, perfect. Yes, I hear you. No accent, no hesitation, no emotion. Edmund froze. Sarah felt her stomach drop. The girl did not look at him. Her eyes stayed fixed forward. Her face remained blank. Then she returned to the unified speech as if nothing had happened. Grimm crossed himself. That was when Edmund realized this was not illness. This was something else. And this was only the first child to answer. If this unsettled you, wait until you hear what the children said next. Subscribe, share, and tell me in the comments what you think was happening here. In part 3, the children begin answering questions no one ever asked them. And what they describe will make grown men leave the room shaking. Part 3, the language of remembering. Some moments stay with you forever. Not because they are loud or violent, but because they quietly rewrite what you thought was possible. This is the part of the story where doubt begins to crack. If you enjoy unsettling history that feels uncomfortably real, subscribe now, share this video, and leave a comment. Because what these children said next shook educated men who believed they understood the world. It began with 3 simple words. We hear you. We understand you. We are here. Edmund Pierce felt his pulse quicken. What is your name? He asked gently. Rebecca. The voice came from the oldest girl. Calm, flat, perfect English. Rebecca, what are you saying? What language are you speaking? The language of remembering. The words sent a chill through the room. Who taught you this language? No one taught us. We already knew. That is not possible, Edmund said carefully. All language must be learned. Who taught you? For the first time, Rebecca's eyes moved. They shifted away from the wall and locked onto Edmund's face. The blankness faded. What replaced it was not emotion. It was awareness. Focused. Adult. Alert. We have always known, she said. Since before we were born. Since before our mothers were born. We carry it inside. We are vessels for what came before. Then her gaze drifted forward again. She returned to the unknown language. Instantly. Seamlessly. As if the conversation had never happened. Edmund tried again. No response. Sarah watched every second, her hands trembling as she wrote. She noted how Rebecca's expression changed only when she spoke English. How her voice shifted from distant chanting to clear reasoning. That was not confusion. That was control. Edmund spent hours in the sick house. He tested reflexes. He checked breathing. He tried separating the children. That failed immediately. When one child was moved to the opposite corner of the room, the child began trembling violently. A high wailing sound escaped their throat, sharp and painful. It stopped only when the child was returned to the group. Food had no effect. Water had no effect. Heat did not break the trance. Finally, exhausted and overwhelmed, Edmund admitted he could do nothing more that day. As they left, Walter Grimm pulled him aside. Not the first time this has happened, Grimm muttered. What do you mean not the first time? Edmund asked sharply. 3 more last week. Different plantation. Owners keeping quiet. Why was I not notified? Bad for business, Grimm said. Folks hear slaves speaking in tongues. They start whispering about witchcraft. Possession. Panic spreads. This is not superstition, Edmund said. This requires investigation. Maybe so. But Mr. Porter wants them sold. Buyer from Alabama. Leaving next week. You cannot sell sick children. They are not sick, doctor. That is the problem. The ride back to Savannah was silent. Only when the sun dipped low did Edmund finally speak. She spoke like she had been educated, he said. Grammar. Vocabulary. Abstract ideas. Vessels. Remembering. Those children have never been taught anything. They work from age 5. What was the other language? Sarah asked. I do not know, Edmund admitted. It was structured, complex, not childish, and they spoke in perfect unison. That level of coordination is not accidental. Then what is it? Sarah asked. I do not have a rational explanation. That night, Sarah wrote until her hand ached. Edmund believes it is hysteria or shared delusion, she wrote. But I watched Rebecca's eyes. That was clarity, as if she was more awake than any of us. She spoke of memory, of carrying something forward. What are they carrying? The next day, Edmund buried himself in medical texts. Nervous disorders, group delusions, religious trances, fever dreams, none matched. These children were calm, healthy, focused. Their language followed rules. Meanwhile, Sarah asked Martha and Bess about old stories. About languages. About strange children. Martha hesitated, then spoke quietly. My grandmother told stories like this. Children who remembered things they never lived. Languages that survived even when mouths forgot them. The ancestors do not forget, Martha said. Sometimes they speak through those who listen. Do you believe that? Sarah asked. I believe there are things white folks do not understand about us, Martha said. Things that survived the crossing even when everything else was taken. What survived? Sarah asked. Memory. Over the next weeks, the incidents multiplied. June 19th. Riverside Plantation. 2 boys, ages 7 and 8. They stopped working, sat down in the dirt, began speaking. Nothing broke the trance. When Edmund arrived, he asked questions. The older boy answered. We see what happened here, the boy said. We see the ones who came before us. We remember. Remember what? Everything. The ships, the markets, the beatings, the ones who died. You were not alive then, Edmund said. We have always been alive, the boy replied. We died and came back. We came back so someone would speak. Then silence. Then the unknown language resumed. June 24th. Thornton Fields. 4 children this time. Same age range. Same language. Same trance. Same words. We remember. By the end of the month, Edmund had examined 7 children. 7 others disappeared before he could reach them. Sold. Moved. Hidden. Officials documented everything. Then they locked the files away. If this story is unsettling you, that is only the beginning. Subscribe, share, and comment your thoughts. In part 4, the children begin writing. And what they put on paper terrifies the men who read it. Part 4. When the children began to write. Some mysteries are heard, some are seen, but the ones that are written down can haunt generations. This is the story of what happened when the children at Bellbrook and surrounding plantations began putting words on paper. What they wrote would shock everyone who thought they understood history, language, and even memory itself. If you are drawn to stories that are eerie, historic, and impossible to explain, subscribe now, share this video, and leave a comment. You will not want to miss what happens next. After the incidents at Bellbrook and Riverside plantations, Edmund Pierce began to notice something new. The children did not only speak the unknown language in English. Some of them began writing it. The first was Rebecca. She refused a pen at first. She would not look at the paper. But when Edmund placed a small notebook in front of her and encouraged her gently, something changed. Her hand moved on its own. Not clumsy scribbles. Not childish marks. Perfect, flowing symbols. A language Edmund could not read. But structured, consistent, organized. Sarah watched, leaning close to transcribe what she could. Abacow, she wrote down. Merenda Kalashenda. These were the same sounds she had tried to capture phonetically from the children's spoken language. Now they appeared in written form, precise and deliberate. Edmund flipped through medical texts, dictionaries, and surviving African manuscripts. Nothing matched. Not a single known African dialect. Not even a mix of languages. Then the children began combining English and the unknown tongue. Small sentences appeared, sentences too mature for their ages. Concepts they could not have learned. I carry what came before. We remember even what is forgotten. The pain of the crossing is alive in us. Edmund felt a chill. He had studied countless medical cases in Boston and across New England. Nothing could explain this. No fever, no delirium, no trauma. Yet here were words from children who had never been taught to read or write. Words expressing history, memory, and knowledge far beyond their years. Sarah asked Rebecca to write in English. Slowly, carefully, she did. We are vessels, Rebecca wrote. We carry the past so that someone speaks. The younger children began writing too. Their handwriting differed, but the language was identical. They added details about ships, markets, and the cries of children on auction blocks. Some phrases were abstract, almost poetic. Some were terrifyingly precise. We died and came back, one child wrote. We remember who survived. We remember who did not. Sarah shivered as she read aloud. The room felt heavy. The words seemed alive. Edmund frowned. There was no rational explanation. No precedent. Not in medical journals. Not in any reports of children anywhere in America or Africa. He tried to examine the children again. Checked for illness. Checked for malnutrition. Nothing. Healthy, active, normal bodies. Yet the minds and hands of these children carried history itself. And then came the first alarming discovery. Some of the writing described events that occurred decades before the children were born. Names of ships that had arrived in Savannah years ago. Auctions he had read about in old newspaper clippings. Names of enslaved people who had long since passed. Edmund read a line aloud to Sarah. Who taught you this? He asked. We remember, the child wrote back. We always knew. Edmund looked at Sarah, pale and tense. She felt the same terror. Something impossible was happening. Something that violated all logic, all medical knowledge, all understanding of how children learn. Over the next week, the pattern repeated. Children from other plantations began writing when he arrived. Names, numbers, histories, and songs. Songs that matched the tunes Martha had described, words that had been lost to her people, phrases passed down silently for generations. Edmund started keeping meticulous notes. Dates, names, locations, ages of children, the words they wrote. By the end of June, he had records from 7 different plantations. 7 sets of children writing words no one alive could have taught them. Sarah compared the writings. Patterns emerged. Repeated phrases. Symbols and syllables appearing in exactly the same order, even among children who had never met. The coordination was uncanny. One page sent chills down her spine. Written in both English and the unknown tongue, the sentence read. We speak so someone remembers. She wrote in her journal that night. Edmund will look for medical explanations, she noted. I fear the answer lies outside medicine. I have watched these children. They are vessels. The implications began to weigh on them both. These children were not just speaking. Not just remembering. They were preserving history. Something so deep and fundamental that it had survived slavery, displacement, and violence. Something that could not be erased. The following incidents escalated quickly. On June 24 at Thornton Fields, 4 children began writing in unison. They were forced to sit on the dirt floor under overseer watch, yet their hands moved almost mechanically, producing symbols in English. Phrases. Edmund and Sarah were there for hours. The children refused food, ignored questions, and focused entirely on their writing. By the time the sun began to set, pages were stacked on the floor. Every page had structured text. Every page repeated certain patterns, some the same as Bellbrook and Riverside. It was as if the children were all connected, sharing knowledge across plantations, across distances, without speaking. Edmund tried separating them. It failed. Even when placed in different rooms, the children wrote the same sequences, the same songs, the same histories. Sarah wrote in her journal that night. Memory is alive. It can survive chains, distance, death. We are seeing it in action. In children who cannot possibly have learned these things, in a world that tried to erase them. She paused. What if this is what history looks like when it speaks through the innocent? The implications terrified Edmund. If this is natural, he thought, it violates every principle of medicine and science. If it is not, then what are we witnessing? The children were healthy, alive, but their minds carried more than knowledge. They carried the weight of generations. By the end of June, Savannah was buzzing quietly with rumors. Overseers and plantation owners whispered about strange children, about vessels, about the ability to remember the unrememberable. Some wanted to silence the children. Others began to treat them with fear and superstition. But Edmund and Sarah continued to observe, document, and protect them as best they could. Sarah wrote in her final journal entry for June. We have seen a window into the impossible. We have seen memory persist where it should have died. I do not know if medicine or science can ever explain this. But I will record it. So someone will remember. Subscribe, share, and leave a comment if this chills you. In part 5, the children begin describing what they remember in ways that terrify the adults around them. The voices grow stronger, and the stories they tell will reveal secrets no one wants to hear. If you want, I can start part 5 immediately and make it even darker and more horrifying, showing the children recounting actual historical horrors with shocking clarity. Do you want me to do that next? Part 5. The children tell what should not be remembered. Some voices cannot be silenced. Some stories refuse to be forgotten. And sometimes those voices come from mouths too small to speak the full weight of history. This is the part of the story where the children began to tell what they remembered. What they said shook Edmund Pierce and his wife Sarah to their core. It made them realize that this was no ordinary mystery. What these children carried inside them was a living history, raw and terrible, that no adult wanted to hear. If you are fascinated by historical mysteries and chilling stories, subscribe now, share this video, and leave a comment. You will not believe what happens next. The first visit was at Riverside Plantation. Edmund and Sarah arrived early in the morning. The sun had just risen over the marshes, painting the fields in pale gold light. The two boys from the previous week were sitting quietly in a corner of the plantation's storage shed. Their hands were folded, their eyes closed. When Edmund spoke, asking if they could write, they opened their eyes slowly. They did not look at him or Sarah. Instead, their gaze seemed to pierce into the distance. We remember everything, the older boy said softly. We remember what was done to us. Edmund's heart pounded. What do you mean? He asked carefully. The boy began writing on a small piece of parchment. Each letter precise, deliberate. Each word uncomfortably clear. Ships came from far away, he wrote. They brought people in chains. Mothers were torn from arms. Children sold for cotton and gold. He stopped and looked at Edmund. I was on the ship. I remember the decks, the chains, the cries. I remember the water, the smell of salt, the fear. Sarah felt her throat tighten. These were children born in Georgia. They could not have been on ships. They could not have remembered the horrors of the Middle Passage. But they did. Over the next hours, the boys wrote more. They described auctions in Savannah. The way mothers pleaded with strangers for the safety of their children. The beatings that followed disobedience. The silent despair in the eyes of men and women forced to work from sunrise to sunset. Edmund and Sarah listened in silence, taking notes, trying to reconcile what they saw with reason. At Bellbrook Plantation, Rebecca and the two other children began telling their own memories. In writing, in speech, and sometimes in synchronized chants. We saw the markets, Rebecca wrote. We saw the auctions. We saw the families torn apart. We saw the children cry and the mothers scream. The words were calm, emotionless, almost clinical. Yet they described horrors no 6-year-old could endure. The precision of memory, the clarity of detail, was impossible. Sarah noticed a rhythm in their language, a cadence that made the events almost musical. The chanting carried history like a song, like a warning. Edmund asked the children to explain. How can you know this? How can you remember? The children responded as one. We died and came back so someone would remember. We remember so someone would speak. The implications were unbearable. These children claimed they had lived lives before this one. That they carried memories not their own. And as Sarah wrote in her journal that night, she realized that these memories were not random. They were collective, shared across plantations, across families, across generations. At Thornton Fields, 4 children added even more detail. They wrote the names of ships, the plantations, the overseers, the traders. They drew maps of Savannah, marking the docks, the roads, the fields. They identified people who had died decades before their births. Edmund could not explain it. There was no fever, no trauma, no known medical condition that could account for this level of historical knowledge. And yet the children wrote it all, calmly, with perfect spelling, perfect grammar, and terrifying accuracy. Sarah noticed a pattern in the unknown language. Certain words were repeated across plantations, across children who had never met. Some words seemed to name feelings. Some named actions. Some named places and people long gone. She asked Martha and Bess about these words. They confirmed that some sounds survived from Africa. Some were old songs and chants passed down quietly through generations. But nothing explained the full sentences, the details, the coherence, or the advanced concepts the children expressed. One line from Thornton Fields stopped Sarah cold. Written in both English and the unknown tongue, it read, "We carry the weight of the dead. We carry what is erased. We carry what you cannot see." Edmund could only stare. He had seen suffering before. He had treated broken bones and fevered bodies. He had witnessed death countless times. But this was different. This was a memory he could not treat or cure. It was knowledge, living memory made flesh. Over the following weeks, more plantations reported similar cases. Children ranging from 4 to 9 would stop work, sit, and begin writing or speaking in the unknown language. English appeared sporadically, always when adults asked questions. But the unknown language flowed continuously, almost as if it were their natural voice. The content was the same everywhere. Memory of ships. Memory of markets. Memory of cruelty and loss. Names of people who had suffered and survived. Names of those who had died. One child at a small rice plantation whispered while writing, "We are not afraid of remembering. We are afraid of forgetting." Sarah wrote that sentence down 3 times. She could not shake it from her mind. These children were not merely repeating history. They were preserving it, guarding it. They were protectors of knowledge erased by violence. Edmund tried to remain scientific. He suggested shared delusions, mass hysteria, or trauma-induced hallucinations. But even he began to doubt these explanations. The children showed no signs of illness, no anxiety, no fear. They were calm, focused, precise. The level of synchronization across children and plantations defied probability. Some phrases were philosophical, some expressed grief, some accused, some instructed. One sentence written in the unknown language, later translated phonetically by Sarah, read, "Those who cannot remember are doomed to repeat." Sarah felt the weight of it. These children were speaking not just for themselves, but for everyone who had been silenced. By the end of July, the phenomenon had grown. Reports came from as far as 15 miles outside Savannah. Overseers and plantation owners whispered fearfully. Traders tried to keep the children hidden or sold them quickly. Edmund and Sarah continued documenting. They created detailed records, transcribing every word, every chant, every phrase. They began to realize the scope. The children were vessels, carrying centuries of memory. They were alive repositories of a history too terrible for adults to face. Sarah wrote late into the night. "I do not understand. I do not want to understand. And yet I must. To ignore this is to betray those who cannot speak. These children carry the voices of the past. And they are speaking. Subscribe, share, and leave a comment if you feel the weight of these words." In part 6, the children begin to describe things no adult wants to hear. They describe cruelty in unimaginable detail. They describe power and injustice. And they describe things that make even Edmund Pierce question reality itself. If you want, I can write part 6 next, focusing on the children recounting events in detail that shock and horrify the adults, keeping the pacing tense and cinematic for YouTube. Do you want me to continue with part 6 now? Part 6. The children speak the horrors. Some stories are too loud to ignore. Some voices cannot be silenced no matter how much people try. And some truths are too heavy for adults to bear. This is the part where the children began describing what no one wanted to remember. What they spoke and wrote made even the most experienced adults tremble. Their words revealed cruelty and injustice with terrifying clarity. If you are ready for a story that blends history, horror, and mystery, subscribe now, share this video, and leave a comment. The world they describe will haunt you. It began at Bellbrook Plantation in early August. Rebecca and the two younger children sat in the corner of the sick house. They had been quiet that morning, heads bowed over scraps of parchment. Sarah Pierce entered first. She noticed immediately that the children were not just writing words. They were drawing shapes, diagrams of buildings, roads, and fields. Lines connected points as if mapping events and people. Edmund followed, his medical bag in hand. He tried to focus on observation, on clinical detachment. But even he could not prepare for what the children began to say. "We saw them," Rebecca whispered in English. "We saw the ones who hurt us." Edmund knelt beside her, careful not to disturb her focus. "Who hurt you?" he asked. "Not us," she said. "Them before us. The ones who came before us." Her words were calm, almost emotionless, yet the meaning carried centuries of pain. Sarah took careful notes. The children began writing in the unknown language. The symbols flowed with precision. Some resembled letters, others looked like musical notes. The shapes were beautiful and frightening at once. They wrote about ships, not only the ships that carried enslaved people across the ocean. They described the docks in Savannah, the merchants who bought and sold humans like property, the overseers who beat children for misbehavior. Edmund read one line aloud. His voice shook. "We saw the mothers scream. We saw the children sold. We saw the men die and the women cry." The words were factual, almost like a report. Yet the horror was undeniable. They described specific people by name, even though these children could not have known the names naturally. "We remember," Rebecca wrote in English this time. "We remember everything." At Riverside Plantation, similar scenes unfolded. The two boys from June now sat together, hands moving in unison across paper. The first boy spoke. He told of fields where the sun burned the skin of workers. He described wounds that were left untreated. He described the sound of chains clanking at dawn. He described the faces of men and women who were terrified yet silent. The older boy looked at Edmund. "You must remember," he said. "If you do not, it will happen again." Edmund swallowed hard. He had treated injuries, illness, and disease. He had seen death. But this was different. This was memory alive in the present. Memory that had been transmitted through time, through children, through voices. At Thornton Fields, 4 children now sat side by side, scribbling, chanting, and sometimes speaking English. They described beatings, punishments, auctions, and separations. They named overseers, plantation owners, and merchants. They named children who had been sold far away and never seen again. Sarah took careful notes. These children were telling the truth. They did not embellish. They did not exaggerate. They did not show fear or emotion. They were recording history as if they were historians and witnesses simultaneously. "We died and came back," one child wrote. "We came back to tell the story." The words chilled Sarah to the bone. Edmund looked over her shoulder. "How can they know this?" he asked. "They remember," Sarah whispered. "They carry it." The children began to describe more than events. They described feelings. The despair, the fear, the hunger, the exhaustion. They described hope, fleeting and fragile. They described small acts of kindness among enslaved people that had gone unnoticed by adults. "We see it all," one boy said. "We see the suffering, the courage, the lives erased. We carry it in us." Sarah wrote in her journal that night. "These children are not merely witnesses. They are vessels. They carry the memories of people long gone. They speak because the world refused to listen." Edmund spent hours in his study, reviewing medical texts, consulting colleagues by letter. Nothing matched this phenomenon. No case of hysteria, trauma, or memory disorder explained children speaking and writing histories they could not have lived. Even the unknown language remained a mystery. Certain words and phrases appeared consistently across plantations, even among children who had never met. Some words were repeated in chants, while others appeared in writing alone. Sarah asked Martha and Bess about these words. They confirmed that some sounds were familiar. Songs, chants, and stories from Africa that had survived the Middle Passage. But nothing could explain the detailed historical accounts. At Bellbrook, Rebecca and the two younger children created a long series of phrases in English. The sentences were short but devastating. Ships came from Africa. Mothers screamed. Children cried. Fathers fought and died. We remember them. We speak for them. Sarah read the sentences aloud to Edmund. His face was pale. He had studied disease, medicine, and anatomy. He had not studied this. The children were not afraid. They did not flinch. They did not cry. They wrote, spoke, and chanted with calm precision. In the following days, reports reached Savannah from other plantations. Children across the region exhibited the same behavior. Sitting quietly, writing, speaking, sometimes chanting in unison. Every report told the same story. Edmund and Sarah began to compile their own archive. Pages of writing, transcripts of speech, and observations. They realized the scale of what they were witnessing. The children were preserving a history no adult could tell. A history erased by violence, greed, and time. Sarah wrote late into the night. Memory is alive. Memory survives where life is taken. These children carry what adults cannot see. They speak for the ones who cannot speak. The weight of it pressed on both of them. Edmund, a man of science, could not deny the phenomenon. Sarah, a woman of observation and heart, could only bear witness. Subscribe, share, and comment if this story chills you. In Part 7, the children will speak not just of the past, but of things happening around them. Secrets that adults tried to hide. And the truth will grow darker. If you want, I can create Part 7 next, where the children's memory begins to reveal active secrets in the present, increasing tension and horror for the YouTube audience. Do you want me to continue with Part 7 now? Part 7. The children see the secrets of the present. Some memories are ancient, some voices echo across generations. And some children see what no adult dares to notice. This is the story of what happened when the children's memories reached beyond the past and into the present. What they saw terrified everyone who thought the horrors of history were behind them. If you are drawn to historic mysteries, chilling stories, and unexplainable phenomena, subscribe now, share this video, and leave a comment. You will not want to miss what happens next. By early September, the phenomenon had spread. Children at Bellbrook, Riverside, Thornton Fields, and other plantations began not only writing the horrors of the past but also noticing events happening in real time. It started at Bellbrook one humid morning. Rebecca and the two younger children were in the sick house, writing in the unknown language as usual. Sarah and Edmund arrived to observe. The children suddenly stopped. Their eyes lifted, focused, and they spoke in unison. They are coming. Edmund frowned. Who is coming? He asked. He cannot tell us, the youngest whispered. Rebecca began writing rapidly, English words appearing among the symbols. Names of people on the plantation. Names of visitors. Names of overseers who were planning punishments that day. Edmund's brow furrowed. How could they know this? He checked the register. Some of the names were of people he had never met. Others were of men and women expected to arrive that week. The children wrote with terrifying precision. The next day, a trader arrived at Bellbrook. His name matched the one the children had written. Sarah and Edmund exchanged glances. This was no coincidence. At Riverside, the two boys began describing events before anyone else knew. Missy, the cook, will drop the pot today, the older boy wrote. The overseer will shout. The children hiding near the fields will run. Edmund and Sarah were stunned. Later that morning, exactly as predicted, the events unfolded. Missy dropped the pot. The overseer shouted. Children ran. Every detail matched perfectly. It became clear that these children were not only vessels for the past but also sensitive to actions and intentions in the present. They perceived things adults could not. They sensed secrets, lies, and hidden truths. At Thornton Fields, 4 children began to write about abuses that plantation owners and overseers had tried to hide. He beats the small boys at dawn, the oldest wrote. He hides the marks with clothes. The master thinks no one sees. We see. The overseer, Mr. Dalton, was a cruel man. He believed his punishments were private. He did not realize that children could see, remember, and write down what adults thought invisible. Sarah and Edmund struggled to keep the writing. Each page was evidence, but it also carried a weight that made the air heavy. Reading it felt like touching fire. Some sentences described acts of theft, cruelty, and corruption among the owners themselves. Some revealed that certain families profited not only from labor but also from secrets, debts, and silent oppression. At Bellbrook, Rebecca began speaking English with a calm precision. She pointed to specific cabins. The boy in cabin 3, she said, hides money under the floorboards. The woman in cabin 5, she said, takes food meant for others. Edmund took notes furiously. He could verify some of these claims. Others he could not, but he could not ignore them. Sarah noticed patterns in their speech. The children did not merely describe actions. They described intentions, motivations, and consequences. They understood human behavior with unnerving clarity. One day, the children all began chanting in the unknown language. Sarah and Edmund listened as the rhythm shifted. It was no longer just memory. It was prediction, warning, and instruction. We remember what you hide, the chant seemed to say. We see what you do not wish to be seen. We speak so others will know. At Riverside, the older boy wrote a long sentence in English. The overseer plans to punish the smallest children tomorrow. They will not know why. We know. We warn you. Edmund confronted the overseer privately. He found the planned punishments exactly as predicted. The boy had not exaggerated. He had not guessed. He had known. Sarah wrote in her journal that night. These children see beyond themselves. They see what adults cannot. They see lies, deceit, cruelty, and hidden actions. They are living witnesses, not only to history but to the present. Some plantation owners began to notice. Whispers spread among them. Traders, overseers, and masters spoke quietly about the strange children who knew everything. Some sought to silence them. Others began to fear them. At Thornton Fields, the 4 children began naming individuals who had committed wrongs that day. They wrote letters to Edmund and Sarah, describing the events, the perpetrators, and the victims. One line stopped them both cold. The children wrote, "If we do not speak, these things will be forgotten." Edmund realized the truth. These children were a warning. They carried the past to prevent the present from repeating the same horrors. They were vessels of memory and conscience. The older children began to communicate directly. "We know," they said, "what will happen if people do not remember. We know who profits from silence." Sarah felt chills. This was more than memory. This was justice. By the end of September, the phenomenon had grown in intensity. Children across plantations began predicting events, revealing secrets, and warning adults of hidden dangers. Their language, both known and unknown, became a tool of perception, understanding, and protection. Sarah wrote late into the night. These children are living history. They are seeing what we cannot. They are speaking for those who cannot speak. And they are warning us. Edmund began to fear what would happen if these children were silenced. Some owners were becoming nervous. They whispered about selling the children, sending them away, or hiding the phenomenon. But Sarah and Edmund knew that if the children were silenced, the memory of countless lives, the truth of history and the present, would be lost forever. Subscribe, share, and leave a comment if you feel the weight of what the children reveal. In Part 8, the children's knowledge and warnings will bring them into direct conflict with adults who fear the truth. Secrets will explode into danger. The stakes will rise, and the story will become darker than ever. I can continue with Part 8 next, where the story reaches a tense climax, showing how the children's revelations put everyone at risk and expose corruption and cruelty in shocking detail. Do you want me to write Part 8 now? Part 8. The Children and the Rising Danger. Some truths cannot remain hidden. Some voices cannot be silenced. And sometimes, knowledge becomes a danger. This is the part where the children's memories and warnings brought them into direct conflict with adults who feared the truth. What happened next would terrify anyone who thought history was behind them. If you are fascinated by chilling historic mysteries, subscribe now, share this video, and leave a comment. The story takes a dark turn that you will not forget. It was late September when the first serious threat appeared. Plantation owners had been whispering about the strange children. Some feared they were witches. Others feared they were spies, revealing secrets no one wanted spoken aloud. At Bellbrook Plantation, Rebecca and the two younger children were sitting in the sick house. Their eyes moved between Sarah and Edmund, unblinking, focused, as they wrote rapidly on parchment. "They are afraid," Rebecca whispered. Edmund looked up. "Who is afraid?" "The adults," she said. "They know we see everything." Sarah felt a chill. It was one thing to observe cruelty, to document memory. It was another to witness fear in those who believed they held power. Across the region, similar whispers spread. Overseers began to change behavior. Some became crueler. Others tried to hide what they did. But the children already knew. They were watching. They were writing. At Riverside Plantation, the two boys from June were confronted by the overseer, Mr. Clark. He had learned of their ability to predict events and reveal secrets. He shoved them roughly. "Stop it," he barked. "You cannot know what I do." The children looked at each other, then at Edmund, who had arrived just in time. "We know," the older boy said softly. "We always know." Mr. Clark recoiled, as if struck. He tried to hide his fear behind anger, but it was too late. The children had already written down his threats. They had already warned Sarah and Edmund of his intentions. The situation escalated quickly. Plantation owners began holding secret meetings. They whispered about selling the children. Some considered sending them far away, to other states, to break the chain of memory and warning. Others plotted to punish the children, to silence them before they could speak again. At Thornton Fields, 4 children sensed danger. They began chanting in the unknown language, a rhythm that seemed to vibrate through the air. Sarah and Edmund watched, fascinated and terrified. "What are they saying?" Sarah asked. "They are warning," Edmund whispered. "Warning everyone who will listen." The chant grew louder, more insistent. The children's eyes glowed with focus, their hands moving across parchment as if driven by a force beyond themselves. That night, Sarah wrote in her journal, "The children are not only historians. They are guardians. They see danger, and they warn. But now, the danger comes for them." The first attempt came quietly, almost like a shadow. A group of men approached Bellbrook in the early hours, intending to seize the children and move them secretly. Rebecca and the younger children woke, alert. They began speaking in the unknown language. Their voices were soft but carried urgency. Sarah and Edmund followed, heart pounding, as the children led them through hidden paths between cabins. The men arrived moments too late. The children had vanished from sight, moving with precision that no adult could match. The intruders searched for hours but found nothing. News reached other plantations. Children disappeared from their rooms only to reappear safely elsewhere. It became clear that they could move silently, communicate, and protect themselves in ways adults could not understand. At Riverside, Mr. Clark's attempts to intimidate the boys failed. They predicted his next steps, wrote down warnings, and even exposed secrets that undermined his authority among the other workers. The children's presence began to destabilize the social order of the plantations. Those in power feared exposure. Those who sought to harm the children were thwarted again and again. Sarah and Edmund realized the full weight of what they were witnessing. These children were not merely vessels for memory. They were agents of truth, guardians of justice, and protectors of knowledge that adults had tried to erase. And the more they were challenged, the more determined they became. Their language, both English and the unknown tongue, carried not only memory but intention. It shaped events. It warned, guided, and protected. At Bellbrook, Rebecca wrote a sentence that chilled Sarah. "If you try to silence us, the truth will find you." Edmund read it aloud and felt a shiver run down his spine. He had always believed in medicine, reason, and the predictability of human behavior. But now he realized that something beyond logic was at work. The children's warnings became more precise. They predicted who would attempt to move them, who would lie, and who would try to harm others. Plantation owners began to panic, whispering about curses, witchcraft, and the impossibility of children knowing so much. By early October, the phenomenon had escalated. Reports came from distant plantations. Children spoke in unison, wrote in the unknown language, and predicted events with frightening accuracy. Some warned of fires, accidents, theft, and betrayals. Others described diseases before they appeared, suggesting remedies that saved lives. Sarah and Edmund compiled an archive. Pages of writing, transcripts of speech, and notes from observation. Each page carried the weight of memory, warning, and truth. One night, Rebecca spoke directly to Sarah. "You cannot stop what we do," she said. "We see, we remember, we speak." Sarah held back tears. She knew the children carried the voices of countless people erased from history. They were not only preserving memory. They were protecting life and truth. Edmund wrote in his journal, "I am no longer sure what is natural or possible. These children are beyond explanation. Their knowledge, their memory, their foresight defy reason. And yet they exist, and we bear witness." The danger, however, was real. Plantation owners grew desperate. They whispered about selling the children, hiding them, or worse. But every attempt to interfere failed. The children moved, warned, and revealed truths before harm could occur. At Thornton Fields, the 4 children wrote a chilling sentence in English. "Those who cannot remember will be punished. Those who forget will face the consequences." Sarah and Edmund realized that the children were not only protecting themselves. They were protecting everyone who would be affected by cruelty, lies, and oppression. Their knowledge was a shield, a weapon, and a warning. Subscribe, share, and leave a comment if the courage of these children shocks you. In Part 9, the story will reach its darkest point. The children will face their greatest threat yet, and the stakes will become unimaginable. You will not believe what happens next. I can continue with Part 9 next, which is the climactic build-up, where the danger intensifies and the children's secret knowledge brings them to the brink of catastrophe. Do you want me to write Part 9 now? Part 9. The children face the darkest threat. Some moments change everything. Some dangers cannot be outrun. And sometimes, the very thing that protects you becomes the reason they come for you. This is the story of when the children's knowledge brought them face to face with the greatest danger yet. What happened next would test courage, innocence, and the limits of memory itself. If you are captivated by history, mystery, and horror, subscribe now, share this video, and leave a comment. Part 10 will reveal the shocking conclusion. It was early October, and the days were still hot and heavy with humidity. The children at Bellbrook, Riverside, and Thornton Fields had become increasingly aware of the tension surrounding them. The whispers of owners, overseers, and traders had grown louder. Fear had turned to action. At Bellbrook, Rebecca and the younger children were writing and chanting as usual. But today their voices faltered. Their eyes darted toward the windows, toward the shadows outside. Sarah and Edmund noticed immediately. Something was different. The danger was near. It began with a rider arriving in the pre-dawn mist. He carried a sealed note for Walter Grimm. The message was brief. The children must be removed, taken far away, or destroyed. Edmund read the note aloud. His hands trembled. This was no idle threat. It was a plan. Plantation owners had coordinated. Men from several plantations were moving together, armed and determined. They believed that by silencing the children, they could erase the truth and protect their secrets. At Riverside, the 2 boys had sensed the approach before anyone else. They spoke in unison, warning the adults. "We are coming," they said. "We see the men who plan harm." Edmund and Sarah acted immediately. They gathered the children and prepared for what would be the most dangerous encounter yet. Hidden paths, secret rooms, and the knowledge of every plantation became their allies. By mid-morning, the men arrived at Bellbrook. They were confident, armed with whips, clubs, and iron chains. They believed fear would work, that the children would break, that Sarah and Edmund would not interfere. They were wrong. Rebecca stood at the front of the sick house. Her eyes met the intruders. "You will not touch us," she said in English, voice calm and unwavering. The men laughed. "A child cannot stop men with weapons," one of them shouted. The chant began. The unknown language rose in rhythm, in melody, in power. Sarah felt it in her chest, a vibration that made her knees weak. Edmund clutched his medical bag but could not turn away. Suddenly, the men froze. Their confidence wavered. Shadows shifted. The children were everywhere and nowhere. One moment they were sitting quietly. The next they appeared at doorways, behind walls, and near the windows. They seemed to know every step the men would take before they took it. Edmund realized what was happening. The children were not just predicting. They were controlling perception. The men could not find them. They could not predict where the children would appear next. Fear took hold. At Riverside, the two boys had already begun drawing symbols in the unknown language. Each line, each mark created a map of movement, not only of themselves but of the intruders. They anticipated every approach, every attempt to corner them. One of the intruders swung a club blindly, and the oldest boy spoke in English. "Stop. You cannot touch what carries memory." It was not a threat. It was a truth. The men froze, unsure if the words were real or a hallucination. Some tried to retreat, but others were stubborn. They advanced anyway. At Thornton Fields, the four children had joined forces. Their chant grew louder, almost deafening. The ground seemed to hum beneath Sarah's feet. Parchments flew from tables as if moved by invisible hands. Edmund looked around in disbelief. He had seen medical marvels, he had seen the limits of the human body, but nothing could prepare him for this. These children were beyond comprehension. They were vessels of memory, guardians of truth, and now agents of survival. The intruders began to panic. Weapons clattered. They tripped over roots, walls, and fences that seemed to appear suddenly. Their confidence shattered. Every step they tried to take was anticipated, blocked, or avoided. One man shouted, "This is witchcraft. This is impossible." The oldest children responded in English. "It is memory. It is warning. It is truth. You cannot silence what is alive in us." The intruders scattered. Some fled, never to return. Others were captured by plantation workers who had witnessed the events and realized the danger of acting against the children. The threat was not gone, but the immediate danger had been neutralized. That night, Sarah wrote in her journal, "The children have faced their greatest threat and survived. They are stronger than anyone imagined. They are not merely witnesses. They are protectors. They are memory incarnate." Edmund added his notes. "I have studied medicine, observation, and human behavior. But I cannot explain what we witnessed today. These children defy logic, defy fear, and defy the cruelty of those who sought to destroy them." The phenomenon was no longer secret. Word had spread quietly among plantations, and a cautious respect replaced fear in some adults. Others plotted in whispers, but all knew that these children were not to be underestimated. Sarah and Edmund realized that the stakes had changed. The children were no longer only recording history. They were shaping it, protecting it, and warning the living. Rebecca, sitting quietly that night, spoke softly. "We carry what others cannot. We speak because they will not. We see because they close their eyes." Sarah wrote later, "These words are simple, but the meaning is profound. The children are the bridge between what was done and what must be remembered. They are history living, memory breathing, and conscience walking." Edmund, once skeptical of anything beyond medicine, could not deny it. "We have witnessed a force beyond science. A force that preserves truth, warns the innocent, and protects the vulnerable." Subscribe, share, and comment if the courage of these children inspires you. In Part 10, we will reveal the final chapter. The truth will be fully uncovered, the past and present will collide, and the consequences will leave you speechless. I can now create Part 10, the conclusion and revelation, where all mysteries converge, the children's purpose is fully revealed, and the story ends with a powerful, chilling resolution for your YouTube audience. Do you want me to write Part 10 now? Part 10, the truth revealed. Some secrets are buried for a reason. Some memories refuse to die. And some children carry the weight of the world inside them. This is the final chapter of the story that has haunted Savannah and its plantations for nearly 2 centuries. By the end, the truth will be revealed, and you will understand why history sometimes whispers in ways adults cannot hear. If you are fascinated by chilling historic mysteries, subscribe now, share this video, and leave a comment. The story concludes in ways you will not believe. The weeks following the last threat had brought an uneasy calm. Plantation owners had learned that the children were not to be trifled with. Sarah and Edmund continued documenting everything, but the weight of what they were witnessing grew heavier each day. At Bellbrook, Rebecca, the 2 younger children, and the older ones from Thornton Fields gathered in the sick house. Their movements were coordinated, their chants soft yet purposeful. They were preparing for something. Sarah observed, notebook in hand. "What are they doing?" she asked quietly. "They are speaking to those who came before us," Rebecca replied in English. Edmund frowned. Speaking to whom? The ancestors, she said. Those whose lives were stolen, whose stories were never told, whose voices were silenced. For the first time, the adults truly understood. The children were more than vessels of memory. They were the living archive of countless lives erased by slavery, violence, and oppression. They carried the knowledge, the pain, and the warnings of those who had come before. That night, the children began a chant unlike any before. It was a symphony of voices, English and the unknown language blending together in harmony. The sound filled the room, seeped through the walls, and seemed to reach beyond the plantation itself. Sarah and Edmund watched as patterns emerged in the children's writing. The pages were filled with names, places, events, and warnings. But among them were instructions, ways to prevent cruelty, ways to honor the lives lost, and ways to ensure that the past would not repeat itself. Suddenly, the children fell silent. Their eyes turned toward the window. Shadows moved outside. Sarah's heart raced. Was it another group of intruders? No, Rebecca whispered. They are here to listen. The following moments changed everything. From the shadows, figures appeared. Men and women from nearby plantations, curious and fearful, had gathered. They had heard of the children's abilities. Some sought to silence them, but others were drawn by the truth, by the power of what these children carried. Rebecca stepped forward. We speak for those who cannot speak. We carry what you refuse to remember. We are not here to harm. We are here to teach. The adults hesitated. They had never encountered anything like this. The children continued. They described the horrors of the past, the injustices still unfolding, and the importance of memory. They spoke of mercy, fairness, and the courage it takes to face what others hide. One of the men stepped forward. He was skeptical but moved by what he heard. He asked the children, "How do you know these things?" The children replied in unison, "We have always known. We remember what cannot be forgotten. We speak so history survives." At that moment, something extraordinary happened. Sarah felt a warmth in the room, as if invisible hands were lifting the weight of sorrow and fear. Edmund realized that the children's memory was not only a record of the past but a force that could guide the living. Over the next hours, the children taught the gathered adults in ways no one had expected. They revealed hidden abuses and predicted dangers. They offered solutions for conflict and showed the value of listening to those whose voices had been ignored. Word of the children spread quietly but quickly across the coastal region. Plantation owners, traders, and townspeople began to change behavior, if only slightly. Fear of exposure became fear of conscience. They began to understand that the children were guardians of truth and that any attempt to silence them would backfire. Sarah wrote in her journal, "The children are no longer just observers. They are teachers, guardians, and warning voices. They are history incarnate. They remind us that truth cannot be buried, that memory cannot be erased, and that even in the darkest times, knowledge survives." Edmund added his observations. "I have spent my life seeking to understand human suffering, to alleviate pain. But I have never witnessed anything like this. The children's gift is not medicine, not science, not magic. It is memory, conscience, and courage made flesh." Rebecca spoke to Sarah privately. "We will not always be children," she said. "We carry what must survive, but one day, others will carry it too. You and Edmund must record what you see. Others must know." Sarah nodded, tears in her eyes. "I will write it all. I will ensure that the truth is never lost." The final nights at Bellbrook were peaceful. The children continued their chants and writings, but the immediate threat had ended. They had survived the adults' attempts to silence them. They had preserved the voices of the past and shaped the awareness of the present. Edmund reflected on the events. The children had taught him something impossible to quantify. Knowledge is not always learned. Memory is not always inherited. Some things exist beyond understanding, yet they shape the world in profound ways. The children's abilities would fade from public knowledge, intentionally hidden by some to avoid fear and superstition. Yet the records, the journals, and the stories survived. They became the foundation of truth for those willing to see beyond the surface. Sarah wrote the final words in her journal. "These children are not anomalies. They are reminders. They are proof that memory, courage, and truth cannot be erased. They are vessels for what must be remembered. They are history alive, As the sun set over Savannah, casting long shadows across the plantations, the children sat together. Rebecca looked at Sarah and Edmund. "We have done what we must," she said. "The past is safe. The present is warned. The future is in your hands." The story ends here, but the lesson continues. Memory is powerful, truth is unstoppable, and those who speak for the voiceless carry a responsibility beyond measure. Subscribe, share, and leave a comment if this story moved you. Remember, history is alive in ways we cannot always see. Share it, so the voices that were silenced can finally be heard.